Let me introduce Allison from Optum. Even after we had the first round of sessions planned, we were talking and she mentioned this topic that she felt would be really good for our audience. And I'm like, you're absolutely right. I mean, we did a group therapy session about a year ago that touched on this, but we can never hear enough in advice and best practices and successes of people that have worked very closely with their marketing team, closed that marketing gap, and are getting the voices of their customers heard. So with that, let me turn it over to Allison. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeff. And thank you, Dana. Seriously, she held my hand through a few things since I am, believe it or not a Zoom expert in 2020. All my kids are using the Google Meets format. So it's a pleasure and a privilege to be here today with you guys. I see so many familiar faces and names, but also I'm so jazzed that there are so many more folks here and really excited to share with you a few things. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce myself because I wish I could be there in person. It's a lot easier to present. It's actually, I prefer it to be with you and be able to read the room. But while I'm introducing myself, Jeff, I think you're the poll master. So I have my first poll that right off the bat, I'd like to have you put up on the screen. And I'll keep talking, but this will give you guys an opportunity to answer this. So I've been with Optum for about 10 years now, and I truly believe that all of my roles up to this point have kind of led me to the customer advocacy game. Um, it's such an interesting industry. It's going to continue to grow. It's going to continue to evolve. So I'm really pleased to be a part of it. You can see from some of the other photos, I'm obviously passionate about client advocacy, but also huge on animal advocacy. So yes, it is me in the bunny suit there for a Humane Society fundraiser that I helped with. My husband apparently is camera shy, but also I have my daughters there who are entering that tween and teen stage, which means I get a lot of eye rolls and I get a lot of leave me alone, especially with all of the together time. And typically I try to be outside, which has been the silver lining to this pandemic until Minnesota got dumped with 8 inches of snow. So the other thing, and you're wondering why am I asking you this question? My youngest daughter, 10 years old, is obsessed with useless trivia. So do you remember those like Guinness Books of World Records and things like that? They still do it. She still reads them. And with Halloween coming up, I needed to ask this poll and then just remember it, okay? So we can go ahead and we're going to close this one, but we'll come back to it. So with that, let's go ahead and jump in and get started. So please feel free to use the chat box. Obviously I'm flying solo here, but I promise we are going to have time for Q&A at the end. That is just as important to me as the information here itself. I've actually taken a lot of notes with the last session, which was awesome. So I may look over here from time to time because I was feverishly scribbling things down. So you know a little bit about me, a little bit about who we are, Optum. So we are part of United Health Group. We are one of the 2 organizations that make up United. Optum lives ferociously and strives to meet our mission of helping people live healthier lives and making the healthcare system work better for everyone. We're really uniquely positioned to deliver on that promise, and our business is broken down, if you will, into 3 different individual businesses: Optum Insight, Optum Health, and OptumRx. You may or may not have heard some of these names, but Optum Insight, if you want to think about it, really makes the health system smarter: research, data, analytics, and technology. Optum Health is focused on well-being and managing the holistic person. And then OptumRx is going beyond just your traditional pharmacy management to offer solutions through synchronized care. So you probably saw on the previous slide that we are a Fortune 7 company. The size certainly brings with it its own benefits, but of course that also means that we're huge. Silos, hundreds of products, multiple business areas. So building a customer advocacy program certainly requires a lot of strategy, a lot of planning, and honestly, just some grit and determination to help get the job done. So our programs may differ, but I also think that our programs are going to have an awful lot in common. This is the team here. So our program, the Share program, really what it strives to do, like all of the advocacy programs, is to bring clients together. That's what it's about. Let them share information, share stories, and our job is to make it easy and to make it enjoyable for those clients. That's what we focus on. We're arranged by geography, and some of you may have met some of these folks. They're honestly, we have an amazing manager at the helm. We have a program manager that is basically the glue that keeps us together. And I could spend all day talking about these people, and I get a little choked up because they truly are my friends and they are my family, especially right now in 2020. They've become really important. Um, so a picture, they say, is worth 1,000 words. This is meant to actually just serve as a quick reminder for most of you. I know a lot of you have come a long way with your advocacy programs, but some of you, this might just be a typical Tuesday, and that's okay. But I threw this up here because it has been like the wild, wild west. I think we all relate to that. But we're not here, obviously, to talk about advocacy programs as a whole. You guys already know the value that those programs bring and drive. But you may be feeling like marketing is kind of like that wild, wild west, and you feel like you have so far to go. But this is a reminder of you've been there, you've done it, and you'll be able to do it when it comes to marketing as well. So as we think about marketing, some of us consider ourselves in the customer marketing world. Some of us just roll into marketing. There's a lot of terms and titles that are thrown around, but what I'm here to talk about today is how do we integrate, how do we get creative, and how do we really infuse the client voice into marketing deliverables? So I'm willing to argue that for most of us, just maybe with a few exceptions, we're kind of stuck in an archaic way of thinking about marketing. Um, we're focused on the tried and true. We're focused on what works or what has worked historically. And I'm curious how many of you have heard your marketing department say, we got to get the client voice in there. We have to make sure we're bringing forth the client story. And then how many of you watch marketing churn and burn and the output is completely void of that voice? It's just not there. In the same breath, I'm going to play devil's advocate and ask you all, how many of you have really pushed the envelope with your marketing departments? How many of you are being proactive? Maybe you just find yourself like just being in reactive mode, just trying to kind of meet the needs. Oh, they need a quote. Okay, great. We have so much on our plates that it's very easy to just kind of get stuck. So that's why I wanted to focus on this. When I told Jeff this is near and dear to my heart, because I have focused and then put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into this over the last year. How do we creatively infuse the client voice, and how do we get marketing to kind of change their approach and their thinking about customer advocacy? So my hope is that you'll start to see these things. After we talk today, what you should see is an increased visibility, a recognition, and an appreciation for your program. You're going to make a name for yourself more than you have already. And these partners will start to see you as you are so much more, we are so much more than a spreadsheet with client names and client reference names on there. We are actually a very integral part of sales, of client management, of growth for our organization. And then with that comes, of course, an improvement in overall marketing deliverables, but that attaches your name to sales support and to sales growth and brings you a seat at the table, if you will, so that you'll be able to start also gathering metrics. We're going to talk a little bit about that because it's like, yeah, how do I track it? How do I show it? And ultimately more engaged clients, because clients want to have their voice heard. I have learned that, heard it loud and clear. Everyone wants to be asked their opinion. So by engaging them, you have happier clients, the relationship becomes stickier, And there's more opportunities not only for marketing, but for client retention, for renewals, for upsells. I've heard a lot of folks talking about that this week. So don't underestimate that as well. It's incredibly important. So it sounds good, Allison, that's wonderful, but how are we going to actually achieve this? So we're living in a really strange world right now, 2020. It's just unlike anything that we've experienced. So I would argue that client relationships and our programs are more valuable than ever. Sales is struggling, I think, for a lot of organizations to meet numbers because we're in the middle of a pandemic. Their marketing is being reactive right now. They don't feel that they can be proactive. So, and we're trying to still break through barriers and develop the best advocacy program that we can. So some of these things here they're going to be easier than others. But what I'm attempting to do and be successful at today over the next several slides is to break this down and show you, how, like, the ideas, right? And some of the theory behind it, but then also give you very concrete examples of what I've done, what my team has done to deliver and to create marketing output that follows, these 4 strategies. So very quickly, let's step through those. Being a social director, it's really, for most of us, it's our job to know the clients, but know them in a unique way, and knowing them in a way that is completely different than how sales knows them or how client management knows them. And then, of course, putting on your detective cap and reading between the lines, read the tea leaves a little bit, anticipate what the client needs, and more importantly, what the client wants. And then Amanda, I'm trying to remember what did she say? It was very similar to the bulldozer, but I've used this one before. You can be a gentle bulldozer, but you know what has to be done. And if I guarantee you, if you don't push, I hate to say it, but that one's kind of on us. And then, of course, measuring the impact of moments. We have to measure. It's not a nice to have anymore within client advocacy. We have to show tangible results. So the other piece of this, I'm very excited that as we wrap up today, and like I said, we'll have time for Q&A, but I have the honor of introducing you to someone, a young man named Caleb. And I think that you will find his story inspiring, and also know that without client advocacy and without working with marketing, his story would never have been heard. So I hope you get some aha moments, but then you also have something that is good for the heart when we finish up today. So number 1, social director. This is when all the introverts start to kind of cringe. Amanda mentioned this as well. You've got to be willing to be an extrovert, but it's not so bad. It's not anxiety inducing. Jeff, if you would throw up that second poll for me, it'll be really helpful for, I think, everyone to kind of get a sense for where we're at in our advocacy journey. All of us have different advocacy programs, and I am confident that we all have very different, exposure to those clients. But I'd love for you to go ahead and answer this. And as I'm gathering this data, I'll come back to it as well, but I'm going to be completely transparent. Your answer doesn't matter all so much for this one when we're talking about being that social director, because one of the things I'm going to talk about is creating checkpoint meetings with your clients. Setting introductory meetings or having checkpoint meetings with clients. We're coming up on the end of the year now. So I'm going to go ahead and close this. This is interesting. I'm going to come back to that. So as we come to the end of the year, we're going to kick off 2021. You have a perfect opportunity to reconnect with clients. So establish a meeting, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever they're willing to give you. And how you decide to frame that conversation means everything. Make it about them. Hey, I just want to talk to you. I want to see how you're doing. I would love to ask you a few questions. Do your homework, of course. Talk to sales, talk to client management. Don't get on the phone with the client and ask them something that you should already know. But as you're talking to them, talk about marketing, but don't call it marketing. Whatever you do, don't use the M word, because I have found that when I meet with clients and I use the word marketing, they cringe. I think in their mind, they think that it is a time commitment, right? That it's more time than they're going to have. But with a reframing of that conversation, asking them about, could you talk to us about your experience with this product? We would love to hear about it. Well, now I have a focus group candidate. I have, just general feedback for my product marketing team. Maybe they have some great metrics. Can you tell me a little bit more about this? I'm already thinking about the case study or something that we're going to put together. So just tweak a little bit how you bring up marketing, and then how do we tactically take that and put it together? So if I'm taking the strategic and making it tactical, in this case, with this example, I have these meetings with all of my clients. I do it when they come into the program, but I also do it every year, as I just described. It's a really great way to reconnect with them and make sure that you're reestablishing that relationship that you have. But at the same time, when I'm having that conversation, I'm asking questions. I threw up here on the slide, these are the actual questions that I ask, or some of them. And you'll notice that it's a blend of, strategic questions, some very tactical things that are in there. But when you're listening to your client respond, take copious notes. Be very aware of how they're speaking, what they're talking about, the way that they talk about your products and your services. That's hugely valuable. And you then have that at your fingertips. And as we continue to get to know clients, you're going to find the ways that they'll shine. Where are they going to be the best advocate for you? And that's going to be something that sales doesn't have, but you do. And you're able to make a stronger connection when we talk about client references. But then also something that when you have those at your fingertips, you save time. We heard the conversation about man hours and like how many do you save? Well, what we've been able to do is over the last couple of years through these meetings, we've collected so many of these great testimonials that we actually have a almost like a database of client quotes. We work with our proposals organization. They leverage them. Marketing can use them. Sales can use them. And it's low hanging fruit that you can maintain ownership of, and it saves a ton of time and digging for others within the organization. So then we talk about being a detective. And I have a saying that has always been kind of near and dear to my heart, but it's become a motto really for 2020. And that is cherish the small things. For one day you'll look back and you'll realize that they're the big things. And I think amongst all of the turmoil and the exhaustion and the frustration that this year has brought, um, we've hopefully learned some things, maybe some kindness, humility, some patience, but we've also learned how to reconnect with people and how to reconnect with them in different ways, and finding out that some of the small things really make a big difference to my clients. So Cindy and Melissa, some of you may recall, they did an amazing job earlier this year of talking about magic moments. And that's just it. Those things that matter to clients, whether you have found your client's favorite candy and you send them a box, or you learn about a client's favorite author and you read a book and then you talk about it. Or you happen to find on a Zoom call that your client is obsessed with her Bichon Frise dog and you send a sweater because you just know that it's going to make the client smile. I've done all these things, by the way, but it doesn't have to be a grand gesture and it does not have to be expensive. But that personal, I heard Jeff talk about that earlier, that personal connection, the human element, right now, more than ever, weave that in. We've been able to do that in what I think is a very unique way with our team. And we have focused on social responsibility and volunteering and giving back. And we've been able to weave that into our program because it's important to Optum. It's a part of our organizational DNA. And we started to capitalize on these sorts of opportunities. and it has really made a huge difference from a marketing perspective. So if you start, you think about social responsibility, that's very personal, right? Right out of the gate. So we took this element of volunteering and we took it to the next level with some of our clients. We set up an event where we could volunteer. And the networking just sort of came organically. If we had other clients in a like geography, we invited them to participate. But with that came a brand new opportunity with marketing. So in this particular instance, I'm talking more about corporate marketing or brand strategy, social media, public relations, that sort of thing. So as an example, in Cleveland, we got together just with one client. This is a client of mine, and we volunteered at MedWish, which is a local organization that provides medical supplies to developing countries. And I took a couple of pictures with my phone, and I worked with marketing to put together a press release. It was picked up by a couple of different news outlets, and the client was excited. They grabbed it, they shared it on their intranet site. So really, a win-win. And then in Salt Lake City, we we have several clients. So there were clients, the clients invited family members. We had employees that were there. We worked with 4th Street Clinic. It is a homeless shelter, but they also provide healthcare services for the people in that area. And with with a little homework, few phone calls, right, that we made to some local news outlets, a camera crew was there for that day, ended up on the local news. It was captured, it was shared, and it was something that all organizations could glom onto and something that we could share very proudly and they could do the same. And then finally in Boston, we worked with Camp Harborview, which is an amazing organization that provides leadership opportunities in camps for underprivileged youth. And we were able to talk to the kids. And we did have some local news coverage with this one, but for me, we took advantage of social media. So some of this was shared by Optum. It was shared by other clients that we had in the area, and we had quite a few. And it became a viral sort of sensation with the various, sharing and cross-sharing and retweeting of some of this information. So some of you might be thinking, that's awesome, Allison. So good for you guys that, you have the budget or you have the capacity to be able to do some of these things. But I would argue that, well, nobody's traveling right now. So none of us are going to be doing a lot of these in-person events anytime soon. But you do have the opportunity, even in your own backyard, to think of the clients that are in your area and how can you just think outside the box and how can you have that moment, that unique moment, to deliver some really long lasting results. It's huge. I can't say enough about how far that has gone. So now we'll talk a little bit about the bulldozer here. And you'll see I have gentle in parentheses, but we're building on this momentum, talking about client relationships, the relationships that we're building, and then we're going to use that to strengthen our relationship with marketing, with the marketing department. So you're taking notes, right? You're getting to know these clients, you're finding these little things, you're finding bigger things, where are they going to shine? And then you take that information and you have to start thinking like a marketer and not just a customer marketer, but a product marketer or corporate marketing, and start thinking that way so you can build a relationship. I loved earlier pointing out that having those meetings with your key stakeholders is very important. It's absolutely true with marketing. You have to have at least twice a year, if not more. We typically do it quarterly with our marketing partners so that we can ask them pointed questions. What are you working on? What are your goals for this year? And then how can we help? They may not have an answer to that question, but you need to ask it so that they can start to think about the ways that you might be able to help them meet their goals. You do have to do a little bit of reading between the lines when you're working with marketing, because they may have an idea of, oh yeah, could you get me a quote for this one like sell sheet that we're doing? And you're thinking, great, we're going to do another boring sell sheets. You do have to train your brain to make connections between what you already know and only you know about clients, and then what marketing is trying to accomplish. You can't be afraid to get dirty, to be pushy, and to step in. You can't be afraid to bulldoze a bit. And I've used this probably, I don't know, 3 or 4 times with different topics related to customer advocacy, and it still rings true because the marketing department will get stuck, and they will get stuck in some of the more traditional marketing. But they don't, at the same time, in their defense, they don't know what they don't know. They're not aware of this shared love of animals that I have with a client and how I've used that to create an amazing connection with this financial services organization, or my technology client in Boston that we just have a love of Kristen Hanna, the author. So those sorts of things are very special to you and they're unique. And then part of that also becomes making recommendations and not necessarily accepting the initial reaction that marketing may give you. Um, I try to I live for my clients and finding the ways that we can leverage those clients. So you can't let your clients sing in the background when they have the capacity and the opportunity to become rock stars. A couple of examples of this, and it's very timely when we're talking about COVID-19. So these are client showcases that were created this year, and they both pull from, they didn't exist. They didn't exist in the mind or eyes of the marketers at the time, but they both pull from the COVID-19 pandemic. Um, it didn't exist in their mind, but I kept thinking about how are we not showcasing what is very, very real to these clients, like right now. It hasn't gone away and it's not going away. So KeyBank, they do some really awesome stuff with employee wellness. They have a couple of our on-site solutions, which means they have staff, like Optum staff on site. It's extremely unique. And I made a couple of calls. I talked to my client contact, and she was in the middle of figuring out what do we do, because now all of these employees have been sent home. They're telecommuters. Sound familiar, I'm sure, to most of us. So product marketing had wanted, I learned in one of our meetings, they wanted a case study. They wanted something on on-site solutions. Okay, great. They wanted a quote. That's all they really wanted from me. But as I was talking to the client and I heard the passion come through in her voice, we had to bottle it up. And it turned into something so much more. With LabCorp, they were doing amazing things early on in the game with the COVID-19 pandemic. They were the first one to have at-home testing kits, and they've been focused on working on a vaccine as well. I wanted to showcase their work. We were going to do a blog, and I was all excited, and I went to marketing and I said, I have the perfect client, and I was shut down. I was told, nope, we don't have space. We don't have room for that right now. So I pivoted and I went to product marketing because I knew that the client used our employee assistance program and they were using it internationally with their staff, trying to get them resources to navigate the pandemic so they could actually focus on the work that they were doing. Within a couple of weeks and a couple of emails, we were on the phone having a conversation with their chief medical officer and diagnostic president at LabCorp. Dr. Cavaney may be one of the kindest people that I have had the pleasure of speaking with, but he talked about us and our programs with as much conviction as he did their own products and services. And so these two showcase pieces, and I don't even like the term case study because it really should be about showcasing the client. There's a little bit of Optum in these and a whole lot of client. So I encourage you to do that and to kind of pursue that avenue, because then it's more than a one and done, right? These have been used as showcase pieces, of course. They've been on our website. They've been featured on the client websites, and they've resulted in collateral that sales has used as a door opener and creating, marketing qualified leads that they can use in those areas where they wanted to get their foot in the door. And then the fourth one, we're at 404, is measuring and reporting. We have to talk about showing the numbers because the C-suite, they like a good story, but they love numbers. That's what really drives them. And it would be wonderful if we could still rely on anecdotal evidence of our programs. I think we were able to get away with it a little bit more early on in the game, but now you have to be able to show what's the impact. You have to get into the mindset of tracking everything, every reference, every sales opportunity, and every marketing activity that you participate in or that you influence. You also need to make sure that you're checking in with clients and you're doing it informally, but then you're also leveraging formal mechanisms. We just launched our annual client survey this week. So we'll be able to look at some year over year data. And hopefully you guys are there, or if you aren't, you'll soon be to that place where you can compare, because that's hugely helpful. And we hear about the program, what clients think, but then I hear about my performance as well. I learn about what are the clients, what do they think about me? Also NPS, that has come up, several times. And I believe it was the last session in the chat box, we were talking about compare your advocates to your non-advocates. So that's another data point that you can use. And I think we all know what the data will probably show when we're doing that. So if you haven't started, start today. Even if it's a spreadsheet that you're doing off the side of your desk, to start tracking, how can you measure? Where can you start looking at ways to start measuring, and then starting to stack up the data so that you have a story? Because honestly, what the C-suite really loves is the marriage between great data and a great story. And I think that this is an example here, because I promised I would show you guys some very tactical ways that we do this. This is a snapshot just of one of our business areas, but senior leadership in the C-suite, they don't have time to sift through spreadsheets. They're not going to sit down and look at pie charts and graphs and things like that. And they're certainly not going to read text, anything more than a few bullets. So you have to deliver this relevant information, and you have to do it in an easy to digest format. On top of that, and I'm so glad that I don't do it, that's my boss's job, you have to anticipate 50 questions when you're only going to get 2, maybe. But you have to have the answers. So having your data and having it behind you is extremely important. Couple of things that I'll point out on here. So if you go to the left of this slide, this is tracking, the number of clients in this particular business area that we have in the program. Now, we are very strategic, Optum, with our program on inviting clients who we keep, who we invite to participate in the program, because our goal is to keep clients extremely engaged and to be able to focus on where can they make an impact, where can they do some, help with these marketing activities. And then as we've grown, we've gotten even more like laser focused on that. To the right, it's all about sales, right? Where are the dollars, keeping track of every single opportunity, big opportunities and small opportunities, because they all add up to us contributing to about $1 billion in sales, with a lot more out there for this year. But most importantly on this slide is in the middle there when we're talking about marketing activities. So I'm so proud of this number, because that's why I wanted to talk about this. This has been about 18 months of focusing on getting myself, like pushing myself to a spot at the table. And you can see what an incredible uptick we've had, and how these marketing activities, this actually doesn't even include the quotes, to be honest. These are very tangible marketing opportunities like the ones that I've shared. So with the year that we've had in 2020, it's going to be so much more important in 2021 to keep pushing, to keep getting creative, to find ways that we can get in touch with clients and keep them engaged. And marketing is the way that we do that, from my perspective. So if you remember, if you're all still with me, I mentioned that I was going to introduce you to Caleb. And a little bit of background, Caleb is the young man that I told you about earlier, and Caleb has hemophilia, which is a very serious disorder, prevents blood clotting. And I was fortunate to meet Caleb a couple of years ago at our annual client conference in Las Vegas. And I got to spend time with him. I learned about his love for Nintendo and how he's never without his sketch pad. Got him some snacks to go home on the plane. So it's just all about making these personal connections. But Caleb's story almost didn't it wasn't shared. My colleague, Heidi, she kind of embodies a lot of the things that I've been talking about today. She puts the clients really at the forefront of everything that she does. She, in passing, one of her clients, the employer, had mentioned, oh, and they're working on this and working with our pharmacy branch of the business to get approval for this brand new drug for Caleb. And then it was done. It was a fleeting moment, but she pushed and she asked questions. And all of a sudden, this story came out about Caleb. And I would really like to share that with you all today.
My name is Cassandra. I'm the mother of two sons with severe hemophilia A. With Caleb, every complication you could have with hemophilia happened. In the early years, his inhibitor was out of control, constant infections to a point. He was in a wheelchair all the time, and it would take daily infusions for a bleed to resolve. Seeing my son suffer was devastating. My name is Jennifer, and I work for Optum as an account manager for the hemophilia bleeding disorder team. This job is personal to me. I have two boys, severe hemophilia A, and I want my patients to have the level of care and support that I wanted for my boys. My name is Kelly Whittick, and I manage the health benefits plan at Westpac Benefits and Investments. We look to partner with vendors who are able to help us serve our participants.
All right, sorry guys if I just stopped that on you. Thank you to my own colleague who said this is not working. If you guys can't hear the volume, I apologize. Let me make an adjustment here.
My name is Cassandra. I'm the mother of two sons with severe hemophilia A. With Caleb, every complication you could have with hemophilia happened. In the early years, his inhibitor was out of control, constant infections to a port. He was in a wheelchair all the time, and it would take daily infusions for a bleed to resolve. Seeing my son suffer was devastating.
My name is Jennifer, and I work for Optum as an account manager for the hemophilia bleeding disorder team. This job is personal to me. I have two boys with severe hemophilia A, and I want my patients to have the level of care and support that I wanted for my boys.
My name is Kelly Whittick, and I manage the health benefits plan at Westpac Benefits and Investments. We look to partner with vendors who are able to help us serve our participants regardless of, where their health journeys may take them. CustomerX has been just a great partner because they did an amazing job of caring for this family and helping us to care for this family.
Optum is so good at saying, we will take care of it, and they do.
I treat Caleb like he's my own son. I want for him what I want for my boys.
Hemophilia ruled our life for a very long time. Daily infusions made life difficult. Lots of supplies were needed, and it takes a lot of time and effort. But then we heard about this wonder drug that was going to revolutionize treatment for people with hemophilia A and inhibitors. And we're like, okay, let's do it.
We knew it wasn't going to be a slam dunk, but we knew we were going to get this medication approved for Caleb.
Jennifer and her team worked with WestPath to make sure all of the things that needed to be approved were happening.
I mean, this particular case was really amazing. Every single one of our members deserves the personal care when they need it. And this family needed it, and we were able to provide it, and that's what I want to be able to provide every time.
Caleb's life has changed dramatically. Instead of the daily infusions, now he has an injectable once every other week, and he does it himself now. And so he has been empowered in saying, you know what, I have some control, and this is not going to define me, because for the longest time it did. Hemophilia defined who he was. Jennifer and the team at WestPath, I really have the words to thank them for how they've taken care of my family and how they have fought for what we needed. So thank you. Thank you so much for being compassionate and considerate, and your work has changed his life and the life of our family.
My heart's beating really fast. I love her so much.
That's what we want for everybody.
So with that, I want to leave you with the words of one of my clients here, and to just that video, everything that I've talked about, it's the work that we do. One of my clients texted me this the other day, and I'm just so privileged to be in the role that I'm in. And we all have such a unique job, and we're so uniquely positioned to make a tremendous impact on our clients and our organizations. So for those of you who just have to know the burning question, the Kit Kat question. So I asked, and this came up last night, I snuck this into my presentation as we did trivia with my daughter. And the answer, maybe about a third of you got it. So what's between the layers of a Kit Kat? The answer was D, none of the above, because the geniuses at the Kit Kat factory take all of the imperfect Kit Kats and they grind them up into a paste, and they use that for the glue to hold the wafers together in the candy bar. So forgive my little mushy moment here, but I just want everyone to remember that you are ground up Kit Kats in a way. You are unique and surprising and innovative, and you are the glue that brings the clients and marketing together to make some really awesome things happen. So thank you so much for your time. I'm going to pop over to the questions now, see if there's anything that I can answer. And please go ahead and throw some questions in there. All right, so you all heard the video, and I'm sorry, I was so focused on my presentation. So let's see here if I can go back. There's a whole bunch of questions.
Yeah, Allison, there was one, just when you put up your stats, what does PTRR stand for?
Oh, well, Melissa, I'm going to probably get this wrong. Essentially, it is revenue.
Okay.
It's the
Recurring?
percentage of, yeah.
Okay. Yep.
It's projected total recognized revenue.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay.
See, I don't have the answers to 50 questions. I only have the answers to a couple questions. But yes, it is based on revenue. There's a question here about scaling our advocacy program across product lines, and how did we scale and how did we get internal buy-in? Oh, Alyssa, that could be a very lengthy conversation, but it really started with building internal champions. And it's funny because that's where I cut my teeth on starting to talk about customer advocacy. That was the topic. So if you could reach out to me on that one, I would be happy to share. How do we work with account management and the client? So we do a warm introduction. So we work very, very closely with the account management or the client management team, and we take nominations for our program. I mentioned earlier how we really, there's only about a dozen clients each year that we invite in based on the business unit, but then we work hand in hand. So the client managers know to come to us to nominate clients that they think would be a good fit, and then we vet them. We go through a vetting process. And if we determine that it makes sense, then the client management works with us to introduce it, and then we go ahead and present and we talk about our program. How many advocates? So I assume that that means client advocates, not necessarily the folks that are in a role like mine. Melissa can also check me on this number, but I think we are probably close to 200.
It's 158.
Oh, there we go. We're at 158 across the different businesses. The area that I focus on, I work with our employer clients. So we have probably about 80-ish that just myself and my colleague, we kind of divide the country. I mentioned we go by geography. Nick, also, hey, fellow Badger. Yesterday I learned you're from Wisconsin, so am I. How are we scaling one-on-one conversations with clients? I may need to ask you to expand on that, but are you referring to those conversations I mentioned earlier? If you are, it's really about just making the time with the client. It takes a lot of time, but it is absolutely worth it, because there's nothing that I have found in the form of technology or software to replace that, to have that one-on-one dialogue with clients. So if you think about it, I do that annually, and then I do like a couple of checkpoints. So it's really not such a heavy lift within our program. When I'm working with my 40, 50 clients, I definitely make the time. Let's see what else we got here.
And Allison, while you're looking, let
Yeah.
me ask the question that Kimberly asked. What do you do when your client rock stars are not in a big brand, and how do you convince marketing that they don't always need the biggest brand name or the biggest logo? Because I encountered that also with my program at Forrester. It's, corporate marketing only cared if it was a Fortune 50 account.
And
but,
sales too, right?
Yeah,
and it's kind of a strange position to be in because of being a Fortune 10 company. But I face that, and I have faced that from way back in my marketing days up until now. But I will say that we have made the pivot, and here's how I've gone about it. Some of it is through those quotes and those testimonials, because if I'm gathering those along the way, I have found that some of our, I'll call them mid-market clients, they have so much more to say. And they have the time to commit to us. So I often position it as, do you want quality over the quantity? And by quantity, I mean the big name logo. And we will use those from time to time, because we certainly have some of them in our portfolio. But you kind of have to put your money where your mouth is. That's just my experience, that I have to pull out the testimonials. I have to, and what we started to do to kind of get them, I'll throw in one marquee name along with a few other clients. We've done some focus groups, and that's been really helpful. And once you get clients into that environment, the titles don't and the names don't matter as much, because you're focused on the substance. So that's been my way to ease into it. And then I've been able to grab those clients and use them for other things, and I don't get as much pushback. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, the way I addressed that when I got that same pushback at Forrester was, luckily I had all this buyer research behind me, and I could show that when buyers wanted to hear customer stories, they cared more about that this was a person in a similar role as theirs, in a similar company as theirs, dealing with the similar challenges as theirs, more than it being a Fortune 100 logo, right? And so they wanted to hear the stories of what life is like as a client. From
Right.
people just like them. And so if you're marketing to a 100-person company, right,
Right.
that you want to have customer stories from a 100-person. If it's a $1 billion company in this industry, they want to hear from $1 billion companies in that industry.
And Jeff, you hit the nail on the head, and that's true of reference activity as well. So if you kind of apply that same lens to marketing, so sales, of course, they might be dealing with a 2000 life, you know, company, but they want me to put nationwide on the phone with them. You know, it doesn't make sense. And I've always explained that you're not going to have a fruitful conversation. And one of the things that I tell our client advocates is that this reference call should be a mutually beneficial conversation,
Mm-hmm.
right? Both parties, it's more of a networking exercise than it really is a reference call. And so that matters when you're pairing, right? To your point, you want to make sure that it's the right role, the right size, the right geography, it's the right titles coming together, because all of that matters. It especially within our Optum Insight group, when we're talking about, you know, more technology-based solutions, you can get in the weeds real fast when you start talking about tech solutions. So it's great that sales might want the CEO on the phone, but there's no way that the CEO is going to be able to answer the questions that are coming forth from, say, you know, the director of IT, for example. So it does matter. And I have used that as well. And we actually have pushed back quite a bit on sales. And we've been able to, I think we've overcome that barrier. Anyone else? How do
I
you,
think there's one with
how,
Alyssa right there.
yep. How do
Right.
you work around with healthcare organizations to get legal approvals? So the answer to that is it depends. And it really depends on the organization. And I think it also, the way that our program is structured, you know, obviously a client comes into our program, yes, that gives us some flexibility with using names or logos or things like that. But I don't consider, because they've agreed to be a client advocate, that I get to take their logo and splash it, you know, wherever I want. So in some instances, Alyssa, it's a non-issue. And for others, it is. And we just sometimes have to take that on a case-by-case basis. I would say that you mentioned healthcare organizations. That's a big one. Also working with some of our public sector clients, or maybe our labor and trust clients, versus say a commercial employer client. You know, they have their own internal rules and regulations. So we have certainly made, you know, we just have to be aware of that with different clients, where they'll be happy to get on the phone and have a conversation and use their name, but I can't necessarily take their name in print materials. And I have to, you know, blind them if we're doing, but they're still willing to do a case study, but we have to blind them. And I think that's another thing too, where we've pivoted a little bit and we've been able to get marketing to understand that just because you don't have the logo splashed on the page does not necessarily mean that you're taking away from the content. I just did a webinar with some of those, I had to pull out my marquee clients, you know, working with Target and Nationwide and others, and they all have some different rules. So the article that is being published for a magazine is going to have a blend, and that's okay. Some of them just go by title and some of them go by full name of organization.
And Allison, related to that, let me just ask, actually related to the question about the big logos is also the thing about the pushback or the insistence that often comes from even senior management that any customer story worth its salt has to have hardcore metrics. You just showed us a tear-jerking video that did not have any metrics in it, but probably created a greater emotional connection with Optum than anything else you could have done. And so do you face that type of pushback as well? I need hard ROI numbers because in every single thing that we do.
I would say that the argument is stronger internally for us on when we have to show hard numbers to justify, say, our program or what we're doing, than it is with marketing. And it's interesting because I get that push much harder from product marketing than I do, say, from corporate marketing. And what I have started to do is, okay, if I promise you that I can provide at least one or two numbers and have a metric for you, then can we capture all of this other great information? And that's the whole human element. You know, that video, and the family was at our conference, and the video was played. We talked to the family. If you look back to the survey results from that session, nobody was really focused on the metrics that were shared by our specialty pharmacy, VP. It was more about the family and the impact, because it really is the people first. So, so Jeff, I would just like haul out one of those videos and, show that to folks, but it does seem like it's more internal, or it depends who I'm working with.
Right, and the way I explain that too is, again, talking about knowing what our customers want to hear. And I mean, basically, that my research shows that customers or prospects even, that they want to hear what life as a client is like, right? And just because one client of yours gets a 38% improvement on employee retention doesn't mean they're going to get a 38% improvement on employee retention, right? Mileage varies. And so what I find is, even when we capture these great metrics, what people then really want to know is, what did you do to achieve that result, right? Because then they're trying to figure out, can I do what you did? Right. It's not that you hit that 38% ROI. It's, did you do something beneficial that I could see my company doing? Like, is my company ready to do this? Do I have the wherewithal to do this? Do I have the clout to do this? Right. So that's a big change.
Agree. And I saw, Howard, you asked about the question, I'm not avoiding it, about potential partners that have a less than positive experience with Optum. Okay, the short answer is no, I don't really want to share information about clients that haven't had a good experience, but it happens, right? We do maintain two answers to that question. We do maintain a short list of terminated clients. It's just become necessary. Now, of course, though we're very selective, but at the same time, when clients come into the program, we can't be so naive to think that we're going to get it right 100% of the time. I think that part of being a client advocate is being a partner, right? That it's not the vendor relationship, that it's the partnership that they have, and we will trip and we will fall. And yes, I have had clients talk about that. Now, those are usually stories where we've rebounded and we've been able to, turn it into a positive outcome. But I think back to being human, you have to be human, and you have to be human as a corporation, even a big corporation. And with that comes some transparency. So yes, we have highlighted those stories from time to time. Well,
so
I know
Allison,
I've got 2 minutes left, Jeff, so I don't want to be the person who stops somebody else from taking the microphone.
No, that would be my fault if it happens, because I'm the traffic cop. But so I just wanted to ask you. So SLAP 5 is we get our health insurance through UHG, and so we're an Optum client because that's all of our digital engagement happens through there. But we only have 10 insured. Can I join your program?
So the answer to that question is it depends. And I think to have a successful advocacy program, you have to have a blend, and we do, of small clients all the way up to those you were talking about. But I want to talk to the people that, have 200,000 employees. So we do not necessarily look at just numbers. We look at a variety of things, whether it's how are you using our solutions, what metrics, how happy are you, how closely are we partnering? So my answer to that is yes, perhaps.
Well, if you want a great testimonial, Dana just went through with the renewal process and added her daughter to her plan, and so very smooth experience that we had. But anyway, good. Yeah. So I know we are at the top of the hour. Let's just see if there are any more questions coming in. If not, I just want to thank Allison. Oh my God, that was amazing. I mean, yeah, I still have my little tissue right here. But thank you so much. I mean, your passion for this just shines right through, even on Zoom. We can tell.
Thank you, and apologies for the fast talking, but man, I had a lot that I wanted to share with you guys, but I'm happy to answer any questions offline.
Sure. And again, we're going to be going into a 20-minute break right now for everybody. Just want to let you know, we are recording these sessions. Everybody always asks me that, so they will be recorded, and hopefully within 48 hours of each session, we're going to get them up on the event website. This is definitely one that I know people are going to want to come back and see if they missed it, or even just to get remind themselves of some things that they might not have written down as they were going through it. So this is fantastic, and I especially loved your point about the client showcases, and I like to say you got to make the customer the star of the show, right? Versus making your product or your company the star of the show, and that's another area where I get pushback from product marketing, right? They want to make their product
all the time,
the star of the
all
show,
the time.
and it's like they didn't mention the product until 2 minutes into this or something, and I'm like, well, because it's not about that. Right?
Well, I'll have to send them to you, Jeff, because we don't mention products until page 2 of 3 on those
Right.
showcase pieces. So
Right. Yep.
all right.
Okay. Well, thank
Thank
you
you,
again.
everyone.